as well. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. Welcome everyone, and thanks for joining us today for MLA's webinar, Everything You Ever Wanted to Know About Peer Review for Reviewers and Authors. Presenting today, we have Jill Barr-Walker and Catherine Akers. But before they introduce themselves, I have a couple of things to mention. We have muted your phones and mics. Please use the chat panel for comments and questions during the webinar. And please make sure to send those to all participants so we can all see your comments. Following the webinar, to claim credit, we're asking you to complete an online evaluation. You can do this by logging into your My Learning on MedLibed or using an enrollment code if you're participating through a site. There you'll be able to claim credit and download your certificate for participating. And also, if you'd like to join us via Twitter today, you can go to hashtag MLA Peer REV. I'm going to share that one more time in the chat panel. So that's all I have for right now. Let's go ahead and get started with Jill.
Hi, everybody. So I'm Jill Barr-Walker. I'm a clinical librarian at the University of California, San Francisco, and associate editor of JMLA. My pronouns are she, her.
And hi, I'm Catherine Akers. I'm the biomedical research and data specialist at Wayne State University, which is in Detroit, Michigan, and I'm also the editor-in-chief of JMLA, and my pronouns are also she and her.
Okay, so we want to start today by thanking the people that have helped make this webinar possible. So the JMLA editorial board, Courtney Hoffner, who designed some of the graphics we're going to be using, and my colleagues at UCSF, Ariel, Charlie, and Sarah, for feedback on the content here. So I think most importantly, we really want to thank you all for coming today. There's a lot going on right now, and all of us have been affected in some way by the pandemic, by George Floyd's death and police violence, by systemic racism. So given all of this, peer review just isn't the most important thing that any of us are dealing with right now. So we want to acknowledge that and just really thank everybody for joining us today and for watching this recording later. Next slide. Okay, so, sorry.
I'm sorry. Here you go.
All right, so by the end of this webinar, you will be able to describe JMLA's peer review process, recognize the importance of peer review, identify weaknesses in manuscripts, and compose critical and constructive reviews, and then for authors, respond appropriately to reviewer comments. So Catherine and I are going to be switching off, and we will be monitoring the chat throughout. So if you have questions, during the webinar, feel free to just type those in at any time. We're also going to have some time at the end for questions too. We did see the questions that a lot of folks submitted beforehand too, which is great, and hopefully we will be addressing all of those. But of course, if we don't, feel free to just add those at any time. And next slide. Okay, so we're going to start off with a poll. Oh, wow, Deb is on it. We've already got the poll up there. Great, so on the right-hand side of your screen, if you can see that, we just kind of want to get a sense of who's here today. So select everything that applies to you. Are you, have you published a peer review article? Have you served as a peer reviewer for a journal, or neither? That's fine too. Give people a couple seconds here to complete the poll. We're going to be giving tips both for authors and for reviewers, really of just all experience levels. So just kind of want to see who all is here today. Are we getting some responses, Deb?
We are. We have about 10 seconds to submit your answers. Make sure to select and submit. And here are the results.
Awesome. Great. So this is a really great mix here. Hopefully everybody can see this. So we have a lot of authors here. 60% of people have published an article, 32% have served as a peer reviewer, and 36% neither. So this is a really fantastic mix here. Hoping that, folks can ask questions, and then if you have experiences with either of these things, if you could share your experiences too during the webinar, I think that would be really helpful. So next slide. Okay, another poll. Just one more for now. So we want to get a sense of, you know, of your concerns about being a peer reviewer. So we kind of know what to focus on here today. So again, you can just select everything that applies, anything here, and we'll give people a little more time to read through these options. If there are any concerns that you have that aren't listed here, go ahead and feel free to type them in the chat. I'm going to open that up. There. So just to kind of read these off, I'm worried about finishing the review in time. I don't know what a good review should look like. I'm worried that I don't know what I'm doing. I'm afraid of giving honest feedback because I want to be nice, or none of these. How are we doing with our responses?
Yeah, it looks like most people have responded, and just a reminder to select your responses and then hit submit. And you have about 15 more seconds to reply, so go ahead and do so now. Okay, and here we are with the results.
Right. See if I can move that to actually see the numbers here. Okay, perfect. I can enter a mix here, it looks like. This is great. I'm just writing these down so I can remember them for later. Okay, so it looks like the vast majority here, I don't know what a good review should look like, 73%. A lot of folks, I'm worried that I don't know what I'm doing. And some of these other concerns were a little smaller. We have a few peer review superstars here. That's fantastic. There should probably be more of those. I think you're not giving yourself enough credit here. But this is great. So just kind of looking at these, we're interested in what do you think? Any thoughts about these results? Any surprises here? Anybody surprised by seeing these results? Any other thoughts? Great. Ellen, providing constructive criticism, encouraging the author without being offensive and mean. Yeah, fantastic. Yeah, interesting that time is not a worry. Everybody's got lots of time now, apparently, huh? Yeah, exactly. Thanks, Ryan. I'm always surprised just to learn that I'm not the only one that kind of feels that way too. I think something being published, yeah, it's a big responsibility. Thanks for that, Karen. And Allison, Yeah, these are great. Stephanie, hopefully we can address that concern as well. I'm worried I don't know what I'm doing. I think the kind of getting a sense of folks' concerns here is to, both just share with everybody that a lot of people are having these same concerns, but probably as you are. And really just one of the main goals of this webinar, we want to empower librarians to be excellent peer reviewers. We're going to try to address all of these concerns today. So feel free to just keep typing things into the chat here, and we're going to go on to the next slide.
Yeah, so I'll talk for a while. So to give some context for all the material that we're going to share with you today, we will first explain what we do at JMLA. So it's essentially just what you see in this cartoon. That's our peer review process. Just kidding. Kind of. It's kind of like this, but not so harsh. Over the last few years, we've accepted roughly about 40 to 45% of manuscripts that get submitted to us, which I don't know how that compares to other journals in library science, but to me that strikes me as a pretty high acceptance rate. So, and it seems like over the past few years that the number of submissions we've been receiving has been going up, and our acceptance rate has been going down accordingly, but I can't really say that with any degree of certainty at this point. So here's actually what our peer review process looks like. So, we receive the manuscript, we send it out to reviewers. We try to get 3 reviewers for each manuscript, because we found that when we only have 2 reviewers, it's so often the case that one reviewer gives a glowing review and the other reviewer gives a really critical, harsh review, and it's really difficult for us to kind of find the balance And then also sometimes with only 2 reviewers, one might be really helpful and one might not be hardly helpful at all. So we find that we just kind of get better reviews overall if we invite 3 reviewers. So we usually send review invitations to more than 3 people because it's very, very, very common for reviewers not to respond to the invitation at all or to decline the invitation. So as soon as we get 3 reviewers, we usually we go with those reviewers, and sometimes every once in a while we'll get more than 3 reviewers for a manuscript, but that's quite rare. And every once in a while we'll only be able to get 2 reviews back, and so we'll need to make a decision just based on 2 reviews. We put a lot of thought into matching reviewers to specific manuscripts. And we kind of base our reviewer selections on multiple criteria, really. Ideally, we're looking for reviewers who have published their own peer review work on the topic at hand. So our reviewer database at JMLA currently consists of over 500 people, almost all of whom have established their own publishing record. And therefore, they've experienced peer review themselves. They've had their own work subject to peer review, so they know what it's like. And we are constantly, actively searching for new reviewers to add to our database. So if you've published before and you want to serve as a peer reviewer for JMLA, we would love to have you. Just send us an email and your CV, and that would be great. When you have a profile in the JMLA system, there's a box for reviewing interests, and that's where the reviewers put in all their areas of expertise. The more, the better. And so we heavily rely on the reviewing interests that are in certain reviewers' profiles in the JMLA system. So if you are a reviewer for JMLA, please provide an extensive list of your areas of expertise and keep it up to date, because we really rely on that for matching you up with manuscripts. When we get reviews back, we rate the quality of the review on a scale of 1 to 5. And this is something that we do for our own internal purposes. We don't share these ratings with the reviewers, but it's for us to keep a record of who's a really good reviewer and who's not so good of a reviewer. And we tend to choose reviewers who have given us good reviews, good, high quality reviews in the past. And then finally, we consider how much time has passed since the person last reviewed a manuscript for us, because we don't want to be too burdensome. We know we're asking a lot. So in summary, if you have received an invitation to review a manuscript for us, you can really rest assured that we think that you are up to the job and that you will do a good job. So at least if you get a review invitation from us, there's no need for imposter syndrome. You're not an imposter. So reviewers are by default given 3 weeks to conduct their review. When we receive all the reviews back, we consider them very carefully and make a decision on the manuscript based on the balance of their comments as well as our own opinion as editors. When we make a decision on a manuscript, we explain to the authors how our decision is based on the reviewer's comments, and we copy all of the reviewer's comments into the decision email. And then we send an anonymized version of that decision email, including all of the reviewers' comments back to the reviewers. So we share everybody's, we let the reviewers see, we want the reviewers to see our decision on the manuscript and what the other reviewers had to say as well. We think that notifying reviewers of the editorial decision helps them to see their contribution to our process. And we've heard from numerous reviewers that reading the other reviewers' comments is a valuable learning tool, and we very much agree with that. So we almost never accept a manuscript outright or immediately after peer review, almost never. We nearly always require revisions. We kind of have 2 levels of revisions required decisions. If the reviewers recommend major revisions, we make a resubmit for review decision, which means that we plan to return the revised manuscript and the author's replies to the reviewer comments back to the original reviewers to ensure that their concerns have been alleviated. And we essentially ask the reviewers to re-review the revised manuscript for, with another 3 weeks, kind of going through that whole process again. If the reviewers recommend minor revisions, we make a revisions required decision, which means that we don't plan to return the revised manuscript or the author's replies to the reviewer comments back to the reviewers, but instead we'll make a decision on the manuscript. Our next decision on the manuscript just based on editorial review. So for both of these decisions, both resubmit for review and revisions required, we don't impose any deadlines on the authors. They can just take whatever time they need to make their revisions. So from this point in the process, the cycle of editorial review and author revisions may continue once or twice until we arrive at an acceptable version of the manuscript. We greatly appreciate our reviewers. Our reviewers are critical to helping us determine which manuscripts to publish and for improving the quality of the manuscripts that we publish. So I saw in the chat a few minutes ago, somebody said that one of their concerns was that they didn't want to affect other people's like publishing pursuits, but that's exactly what we're asking you to do. I know you might feel bad about, blocking people's, thinking that you're blocking people's publications, but we really, really want your thoughts on whether we should publish a manuscript at all, or how to improve a manuscript. So to publicly acknowledge our reviewers, we publish an annual thank you editorial that lists the names of the people who reviewed for us in the past year. So our most recent thank you editorial lists a total of 220 reviewers. We also believe that our peer reviewers should receive scholarly credit for their contributions. For example, for me, I have a section on my CV that lists the journals for which I've served as a peer reviewer. And I also have an account, it's a free account on Publons, which is a scientific networking site that keeps kind of official public records of peer reviewing work. So we would really encourage our reviewers, if this looks interesting to them, to sign up for their own Publons accounts and list their peer reviewing work on their CV and their dossiers, et cetera.
Me again. Hi. Okay, so we've got another poll for everybody. Now that you kind of know the peer review process, we want to talk about what would help you during that process. So we'd like to know what kinds of tools would help you as a peer reviewer. So again, select everything that applies here. We'll give folks a couple of minutes. There's some really interesting questions in the chat that I didn't really answer, but I wanted to get to, and I think this is a good section to do that. If there are other tools that you're thinking about that aren't on this list, please, again, just add them to the chat, any thoughts that you have here. And we can hopefully get back a little bit to that conversation about feedback for peer reviewers too. So some of the options here, guidelines, other peer reviewers' comments, notification of the decisions throughout the process, some examples of strong and weak comments, tutorials, or maybe a peer reviewer mentoring program. Give you another minute or two.
We have a lot of folks on the webinar today, so the poll, I'm watching it. We have almost everybody's answered, but I'm going to give them another probably minute here.
Thank you. Yeah, this just to maybe a little context here. We're really interested in seeing, hearing from you about what would help you here, because this is an area that we're definitely interested in trying to improve and be able to give folks the tools that would actually help you. So yeah, let's take a couple seconds just to make sure that everybody's opinions are counted here.
Okay, I've closed the poll, so you have about another 20 seconds to answer before we share the results. Make sure if you're selected multiple, well, regardless, you do need to hit submit after you make your selections. It looks like most people did answer, and here are the results.
Over. Great, so lots of interest here. This is fantastic. Okay, so it looks like, yeah, these two standouts here. Guidelines, 88% and 84% for examples of strong and weak comments. That's wonderful. This is great that that so many people have selected a lot of these. And let me see if anyone has any other comments here in the chat. Okay, great, about Twitter. I lost the poll here. Okay, so you all are clearly interested in a lot of these, which is fantastic. And I have really great news on the next slide, which is that a lot of these actually already exist. And a lot of these that you think are important here. So currently we do provide guidelines. We provide other reviewers' comments, and we do give the notification of editorial decisions as part of the peer review process at JMLA. We are actually working on a new peer review section on the JMLA website. So we're gonna include some expanded guidelines beyond the ones that we already give. Someone mentioned like kind of a one-pager guidelines with some examples of strong and weak comments. We're gonna hopefully have that. We're gonna link out to other tutorials. And I think this last one, this peer reviewer mentoring program, we haven't talked about that yet. It's kind of an idea that's been floated. And I think one of the main goals here, another goal for this webinar, is to really hear from you all what would be helpful to you. So this is something, kind of peer review education is something that we're definitely interested in working on going forward. And it seems like about half of people selected that peer reviewer mentoring program. So this definitely seems like something to investigate. I think the summary here is some of these things do exist. And some of them we are going to be working on and rolling out. I think the conversation in the chat earlier about how do peer reviewers really improve themselves if they're not getting that feedback, I think it's a really good question that is something for us to continue to think about. So I don't really have an answer for that at the moment, but I think it's definitely something that we're thinking about, and maybe more like proactively trying to use education rather than you know, sending critical feedback to every single reviewer, which is probably not something that's sustainable for us. And Catherine, feel free to jump in there too.
Unmute, okay. So for those of you who are relatively new at peer reviewing, we'd like to suggest taking the following approach, although you're certainly welcome to take whatever approach works for you. So after you respond to and accept a review invitation, we recommend first skimming the manuscript, then giving the manuscript 2 deep reads, and then after that, actually kind of composing the text of your review. So first, you'll need to respond to the review invitation. And JMLA review invitations contain the title and the abstract of the manuscript that we're asking you to review. So the JMLA system by default gives you a week to respond to that invitation. I wish there was a way to shorten that deadline, because we would really like to for you to respond much more quickly, because we're trying to expedite this process, you know, as much as is reasonable. So to return comments and decision back to the reviewer, back to the authors as quickly as possible, and really kind of get your work out there and published as soon as we can. So once you accept, by default, we give reviewers 3 weeks to review a manuscript. Again, because that might sound kind of short, I'm not sure, but we do really want to get the decision back to the authors as soon as possible. But you can ask for extra time. Like if you know that another few days or even another week would allow you the time to review the manuscript, then go ahead and ask us for that. And also, you know, if you've accepted a review invitation and you're nearing the deadline and you know you're not going to be able to get it in by the deadline, just email us and ask for another few days or whatever you need. And it's usually not a problem with us, but we do like to kind of maintain communication as much as possible, just so we know where things are in the process. Let's see. So also, it's best practice at JMLA or any journal. It's best practice not to review manuscripts that are written by direct colleagues or collaborators or friends. JMLA and a lot of other journals employ a blind review process. So theoretically, the reviewer shouldn't know who the authors are, but given that we're a pretty small profession, we understand that complete blinding is not always possible. And it's possible that you could review a manuscript where you suspect who the authors are. Also please recognize if you have any kind of biases that could prevent your ability to perform an impartial review based on, say, the topic of the manuscript or the approach it takes. So after you accept the review invitation, just skim the manuscript pretty quickly to get a general sense of the study objective and the types of analyses that are performed. And then glance at the tables and figures to get a sense of the types of data that are reported. And then when you have a good block of time set aside, give the entire manuscript a first thorough read and take lots of notes along the way. So JMLA reviewers, once you've accepted a review invitation, we provide you with a pretty much a one-page list of guiding questions to help you focus on, you know, what kind of key issues might pop up that we'd be wanting you to spot. And so these guiding questions are kind of broken down into different sections of the manuscript. And we're going to show many of these guiding questions over the next several slides. So, for example, when you're reviewing a manuscript, when you're looking at the introduction or background section, we want you to tell us whether you think the authors provide a compelling rationale for why they performed the work. And we want the manuscripts to clearly state their study objectives. So if the authors aren't doing a good job of this, if they haven't convinced you why this study deserves to have been done, we want to hear that. In the method section, we want to know, for example, we definitely want to know whether the authors have described their methods with enough detail to allow others to replicate their work. That's really a common place where we need the reviewers' comments and where reviewers typically do have a lot of comments. We also want to know if you spot any potential sources of bias, for example, like how participants were recruited, or maybe survey questions were asked in a leading way, and issues like this could kind of unduly influence the results and their interpretation. So we want to hear about any issues you detect with that. For the results section, we want to know if the authors have described their results with exquisite clarity and whether those results seem to be a direct outcome of the methodology that they described. We also want to know if the results speak directly to the study's objectives. Sometimes authors say this is why we did the study, but then the results, this is the purpose of the study, but then the results aren't a perfect match with that. We also want to know if the results reported in the text match the data shown in the tables and figures, and vice versa. And speaking of figures and tables, we also want you to tell us whether these items effectively convey the information and in a way that allows readers to quickly extract meaning or to detect trends. Finally, for the discussion section, we want you to check whether the authors discussed key aspects of their findings and their implications rather than simply restating their results. We want to know if the author's conclusions are grounded by their results or if their conclusions are overstating their results. And we also want to know if the authors are doing a good job at interpreting their findings in the context of previous work. we expect discussion sections to contain a lot of references to previous studies. And we want discussion sections to explain how the study advances our knowledge base or practice. So you've given the manuscript a first deep read. Now, in the same sitting, if you have time, or maybe in another sitting, give the manuscript a second deep read. And the purpose of this is to catch any issues that you didn't catch the first time around. And this also might be a good time to evaluate other aspects of the manuscript, such as whether the text is effectively organized, whether certain areas of the text should be clarified or elaborated on or even omitted. And then whether the references that the authors cite are relevant and they seem complete, they're not missing any very prominent studies or previous work, and those that the references are reasonably recent. And again, in your second read, take lots of notes along the way. So overall, as you're reading the manuscript, it might be helpful to think of yourself as an external consultant, that we're bringing on board to provide your opinion. And please realize that you don't need to comment on every single aspect of the manuscript. If you might have expertise in the topic or the subject matter of the study, but not the methodology, you might not have expertise in statistical analysis, and that is okay. It really is. So just comment on what you can, on what you know, and chances are that the other two reviewers, will be able to point out issues that you missed, and vice versa.
Great. So hopefully everybody read the mock manuscripts that we sent out beforehand, and Deb has just posted a link to it in the chat in case you need a refresher to that. So basically we asked everybody to read this manuscript as if you were a peer reviewer and identify the issues. So we wanted to just kind of open it up, go ahead and type in the chat, what issues did you see with this awful paper? We can kind of discuss and see what everybody thought here. Great. Oh, they're flying it. This is great. No mention of IRB. Sounds like a lot of issues with the methods here. Yeah, and sorry, make sure that you're sending your comments to all participants here if you're writing comments in the chat here. So non-anonymous might be a problem. Visualization could be improved. You don't like this graph? Really? No background? Yeah, a lot of comments about why it wasn't anonymous. Maybe talk a little bit more about that. Why might that be a problem? This isn't an anonymous survey. Yeah, this is great. Definitions, harassment, sexual harassment, gender harassment. Yep. I can't believe so many people said you're worried you don't know what you're doing. There's so many great comments here. This is great. What is meant by public facing? Yeah, a lot of problems with the definitions, right? Yeah, anonymity can change how people answer. That's great. And thanks for this, Hannah. For a sensitive subject, lack of anonymity encourages people to lie in whatever way they think will be positive to the interview. Yeah, exactly. Embarrassing topic. Might be some ethical issues too, right? And some like mandated reporting issues, some legal issues as well, if you're asking people to kind of report things. This is great. So kind of some confusion about job roles and public facing and yeah, this is great. Can almost always be anonymous. Yeah, that's a great comment. So it seems like we've got kind of introduction, methods, results. Think folks are pointing out all the issues that we included here. You know, really we need more information about the participants. There's kind of what is a library employee, right? What's public facing mean? What is sexual harassment? What is that? How are you defining that? I'll mention the trans people. There's some kind of weird stuff with the you know, men, women, gendered kind of reporting here as well. Yeah, thanks for that. Great, and Roxanne has a great comment here. This is what I was going to ask. Any kind of issues with the discussion? You know, so Roxanne's comment on what evidence do the authors believe that this is due to gender roles in the university's culture? Remember that that point that Catherine just made about you really need to be citing references here, right? So that might have been a good place for them to talk about what gender roles are, or what, you know, kind of what evidence are you bringing back to this? This is great. Any other thoughts, Catherine? I think any other ideas about the discussion, maybe? Or any kind of overall thoughts from anybody?
We have some, I think we have some time here, so maybe we could just, I could just spend some time talking about, like, I mean, these are all good comments. Kind of what stands out, some of the most problematic things, or really what stands out to me, is the mismatch between who the participants really are. Because in one place, it's at the methods, it states that only library staff who had experienced sexual harassment were asked to participate. But then in the results section, it says 80% of respondents had experienced sexual harassment, and it seems like that's kind of a contradiction, right? Who actually were the participants? What was the inclusion criteria? Was it any library? Just librarians in public-facing roles? What does public-facing roles really mean? But is it all librarians, or is it just those who had experience?
Catherine?
Information about race, but that's not reported anywhere in the results, is it?
We're not hearing you, Catherine. It sounds like, I mean, we're barely hearing you.
Can you hear me now?
Yes, thank you.
Okay. So did you hear none of that?
We heard most of it. I think for the last 30 seconds you cut out.
Okay, all right. Well, I'll just pick up. The method states that information about race was collected, but that is not reported anywhere in the results. So it seems to be kind of some missing data. The authors say that they found a statistically significant difference, but we like to see, and they say P is less than 0.05, but we like to see more information than that. Like when people are reporting statistical tests, we want to see the test statistic, like what's the chi-square value, what's the t-value, the degrees of freedom, and oftentimes like the exact p-value. So we would like to see more information about that. Jill, did you have is there anything that you kind of wanted to go into more depth about?
I don't think so. I think everything has really been identified. I think a few folks had some other comments about the discussion. Just something that I think I see a lot is restatement of results as a discussion, and not necessarily talking about the implications for the results, but just kind of restating those results there. So that was an issue. And I'm not sure if anybody mentioned this, but the kind of a big problem, which I think you might identify when you're reading over kind of that second task, is that original hypothesis, which I think we can see on the screen here. It's never addressed anywhere else in the paper. So that kind of that connection. this is a good question, Ellen. So some of the issues that are being discussed depend on the type of manuscripts being reviewed?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, definitely. Yeah, we have two kind of major submission categories. Original investigations, which is any kind of research design, quantitative, qualitative, whatever. And then we have case reports, which are really just the kind of descriptive reports of initiatives or programs at usually a single institution. And the nature of reviews will differ. Like, and we are kind of looking for different things in a case report versus in a.
I don't know what happened.
We're not hearing you, Catherine.
Oh.
Program described. Don't want it to be like a showcase.
Catherine?
Rich description of what the authors did at their institution. And then in the second, talk about, their hindsight and different. Did everything go their problem? Half of those problems prevented by others.
Catherine? We're unable to hear you.
Should I wave my hands here?
Yeah.
Hey, Catherine.
Sorry, guys.
You're back.
I don't
No
know.
problem.
Can you hear me now? Okay.
We
I have no
can.
idea what my phone is doing. So there's, yes, we do expect some differences in review comments depending on the type of study, whether it's an original investigation or a case report. But overall, these guiding questions that we've written, I think, really apply to the vast majority of submissions we get.
Any other questions about this or other things that you noticed? Yeah, I think we've identified everything.
Okay, great. You guys did great. All right. So we've spotted numerous issues with this fake manuscript. So now if you were reviewing this manuscript, this is the time at which it's time to actually compose a review that you're going to submit back to the journal. So you're aiming for a review that clearly and effectively communicates your concerns both to the editor and the author at the same time. So at JMLA, our review form consists of 4 free text boxes, and what you see on the screen are what is the information that we're asking for. So we make our review form deliberately open-ended so that you have quite a bit of freedom in how you express your opinions and concerns. Right off the bat, we want to know if you think the manuscript would be valuable and useful, interesting to our readership. Number 2, we want just a fairly brief summary of what the strengths, kind of high-level summary of what the strengths and weaknesses of the manuscript are. Number 3 is where really the meat of your review is, and that is specific. We ask for enumerated comments to the authors. So you've read the manuscript at least twice, and you have a list of concerns or comments. Like, organize those however you want, but provide like an enumerated or bulleted list of each of those comments, each of those concerns. That those are going to be shared directly with the authors. We also have a 4th box that asks for confidential comments to the editor. This is a box, and I think that people are often confused about what's supposed to go in this box. For most of the time, nothing needs to go in this box. We kind of want almost all of your opinions and comments about the manuscript. We want you to share those directly with the author. Save this box for areas of special or sensitive kind of concern. Like we've had cases where some of the reviewers have suspected that the manuscript contains plagiarism. This might be a good place to express that concern to the editor, but you might not want to kind of like blame the authors or accuse the authors of that without some investigation. Or if there's any other sorts of kind of like research or academic misconduct that you suspect might be at play, but you don't necessarily want to accuse the authors of, you can communicate that to the editor and the authors won't see that. And there might be other reasons that you might want to just say things specifically to the editor, but in most cases, you don't need to say anything here. So when you're composing your review, we'd like to offer 3 overarching pieces of advice. We want you to be loquacious, we want you to be specific, perhaps overly so, and we want you to be constructive. So we like it when the reviews are long. When I see a long review, I love it. So if you're typing this out like in a Word document, it might be somewhere between like a half a page and two pages of single-spaced text. We don't want the review to say great manuscript, which is sometimes what we see, and that's just not helpful to our decision making really at all. So please be loquacious. Unload all of your thoughts about the manuscript into your review. Just like we want to see authors explain the rationale of their work, we want to see your rationale for your criticisms. So this is perhaps a better example of how you might express your overall thoughts on a manuscript. We want you to describe, even if you think it's a great manuscript, don't just say great manuscript, like tell us why you think the work is valuable. And then also please do suggest ways that you think the manuscript could be strengthened, even if it's very small tweaks. So please be loquacious, be very wordy, be very verbose. Next, be specific. It's better to err on the side of being overly specific than on the side of being too vague. So if your comments are so vague that the authors can't understand them and the editor can't understand them, then they're really of no help. So for example, this comment could apply to that fake manuscript that we just mock reviewed. This comment states that there are problems with their methods, which there are, but doesn't do well at elaborating what those problems are. It alludes to a problem with participant recruitment, but it's kind of difficult to determine what the reviewer is really getting at here, what the reviewer really thinks the problem is. So instead, try to be like incredibly specific when composing your comments so that the authors have no question about the nature of your concern and also how to address it. So it's often helpful to back up your comments with a concrete example from the manuscript if possible. For example, in this comment, we are, compared to the last comment here, we're more clearly remarking on the apparent contradiction between the methods and the results section and how they describe the participants who were invited to participate in the survey. And finally, be constructive. This particular reviewer comment is based on one that was actually received by Jill. I imagine she wasn't so pleased by it. Jill, do you have any, how did you feel when you received this comment?
This is not JMLA, just to clarify. Yeah, this is not a good comment to get, obviously, from someone. I can laugh about it now, but yeah, it's not pleasant.
So we see 2 big problems with this comment. Number 1, its tone is disrespectful. And number 2, it's not really very constructive. So it doesn't help to manuscript any better. So we do want reviewers to be honest and critical. We don't want them to be too nice, but we also want the tone of the review to be professional and constructive. So I always remember this quote. There's a paper published in an article published in The Guardian about peer review, and there's a quote that I loved that said, "It's the easiest thing in the world to poke holes into something. It's usually much harder to suggest how to fix them." So we want you to spot problems in the manuscript. So we also want you to think about and to share your ideas for how to alleviate those problems. For example, in this comment, the reviewer is not just saying, take out the phrase gender harassment, but instead is recommending that the authors do a better job at defining the term in the manuscript and provide a supporting reference or two in the manuscript. And it's very important to maintain a professional tone. Please do think about how your comments might possibly come across to the authors. So considering these three pieces of advice together, this might be a very good example of a summary statement that prefaces your detailed comments about the manuscript to the authors. So we might say, as an opening of your review, this is an interesting research question that is underrepresented in the library literature. Despite this, I have some concerns about the methodology and suggestions for clarifying and strengthening the overall paper. My specific comments are listed below. So very professional, communicates that you think this is potentially a valuable contribution to the literature, but that we need to see the manuscript tightened up before it can be accepted for publication. So now we're going to shift perspectives. Take off your reviewer hat and put on your author hat. So let's pretend you're an author, you just got comments back, peer reviewer comments back on your manuscript. Now, when pretty much consistently, whenever I get peer review comments back on my manuscript, I invariably become immediately angry and think it's obvious that the reviewers are as dumb as a box of rocks. But as time passes, I gradually come to the anger subsides. I gradually come to see the value in their comments and how I can address those comments to revise the manuscript and ultimately see how the peer reviewers' comments really did improve the quality of my manuscript. So my advice is to, as an author, when you get the peer reviewer comments back, thoroughly read those comments, give those comments a really good read, and then put them aside for at least a few days to let them settle. And then after any initial emotional response has died down, you'll start working through the comments one by one in whatever order works best for you. So based on my own experience, you may often find that the revisions that you initially thought were required are not as extensive as you first thought. Usually, in my experience, when I get the comments back, I'm going to think, oh my gosh, I'm going to have to overhaul my whole paper. But then as you start kind of thinking about them, working through them, you see that the changes that the manuscript needs are not as dramatic as you first thought. And so at the end of your revisions, you revise your manuscript. At the end of your revisions, you should have two products. One is the revised manuscript, of course, and the second is a document containing your point-by-point replies to the reviewer's comments. I'm not sure that all library journals require this to provide point-by-point replies to reviewer comments, but we do. Preparing these replies, like point-by-point replies to the reviewer comments, really helps the authors think through what changes need to be made and why they're making the changes that they're making. So your point-by-point replies document should explain your rationale for the changes that you make to the revised manuscript, or maybe why you decided not to make the changes that were recommended by the reviewers. So this document, we don't have guidelines for how you prepare this document. It can be kind of like a list format that, reviewer A said this, we said that, reviewer A then said this, then we said that, or you can make it kind of in a more matrix format, whichever works best for you. And I want to make a special point here. It's not at all uncommon for reviewers to be confused with certain aspects of your manuscript, and that can kind of cause them to, that can lead them to make like misguided comments. They might criticize your paper in a way that's, you know, based on just confusion instead of like a methodological flaw. So, but if a reviewer was confused by your manuscript, chances are that future readers would also be confused. So I think reviewer confusion signals the need to revise your manuscript to better clarify the point of confusion. So I think that basically nearly all reviewers' comments should be addressed by making changes to the manuscript, however slight. They might be very slight changes, but I would suggest that almost any comment that a reviewer made should be addressed with a revision to the text. Reviewers, if you had the resubmit and review decision where we send the revised manuscript and your replies back to the reviewers really like to see that you made changes to the manuscript in response to their comments. Jill, did you have anything you wanted to add here? No?
No.
Okay. Okay.
Okay. So I see we've got some more questions. I think we're going to have a lot of time for questions, so we can hopefully address these in a few minutes. Just to wrap up here, we wanted to come back to those concerns that you all voted for earlier. And what was it? About over half of people here selected that "I'm worried that I don't know what I'm doing" option. I think a lot of us can identify with that. So we actually asked that same question about concerns to the JMLA editorial board. These are people that are reviewing several manuscripts every year, and this is also a top concern for them too. So just want to kind of reiterate that imposter syndrome is very real. A lot of us are experiencing it, right? But, you know, as you can see here, a lot of our colleagues are also having these same feelings. So if you're feeling that maybe it's just you, it is definitely not. You know, we have the proof here that a lot of people are feeling this way, right? So just kind of coming back to that, when you're asked to review a manuscript, this is really because the editor considers you to be an expert in this subject. You know, you saw Catherine talk about all of these things that we consider when we're selecting reviewers. This is not just a random emailing you. We think that you can do it. We think that you're an expert. And also remember that you don't need to be an expert in every single piece of the paper, right? Just your subject expertise and what you're bringing to that is important. This other interesting point here, so there have been lots of studies that show that reviewers that are younger or have less professional experience actually write higher quality reviews than people that are older and have more experience. So kind of overall, we think that you can do it, you know, and you can do it. You can definitely be a peer reviewer here. And I think just also to go back to that concern, I don't know what a good review looks like. That was 77%, I think 73% of folks selected that one. I think that these two really go hand in hand. And, you know, one of our goals here was to give everybody the tools to create a good review so that you do feel like you know what you're doing. And so hopefully we've kind of addressed both of those here. And next slide. Great. So I love this one. We've got, 60% of us here are authors. I think we can probably all identify what this means. As a reviewer, when you are a reviewer, just really think about the author. You know, if you don't have time to review, that is perfectly fine. That's fine. Just really let us know, either by asking for an extension if you need one or declining as soon as possible, just so we can keep this process going. And also just to be very clear, if you decline, it's not like we're going to stop asking you to review articles. That's not going to happen. So you don't need to be worried about that. Just if you don't have time, just let us know, just as soon as possible. And I think Catherine had a point here.
Yeah, I'll add something here. I'll propose that reviewing a manuscript might not take as much time as you think. I mean, certainly the more practiced you are, the more experienced you are at it, so probably the less amount of time it'll take you. There's been a lot of empirical studies actually about the amount of time peer reviewers spend reviewing manuscripts. There was one empirical study I read that reports that peer reviewing a manuscript, and this is in the domain of public health, peer reviewing a manuscript takes 2.7 hours on average, which doesn't strike me as a terribly long time. And another study shows that spending that there was a relationship between the amount of time spent on the review and the quality of that review, but spending more than 3 hours, any time spent more than 3 hours did not improve the review quality. So we're not asking you to spend 8 hours on the review. Please don't spend 8 hours reviewing a manuscript. You know, few hours, you know, will probably be sufficient. So it might take less time than you really think. And finally, please, I know you don't, we don't want to be mean, but please don't be afraid of being honest. We need your honesty. We really, really, really rely on your honesty. We want you to be candid. We definitely want to hear your criticisms of the manuscript, because those are exactly what serve to make manuscripts better. On one hand, we don't want you to be nice, too nice, be nice. On one hand, we don't want you to be too nice. On the other hand, we don't want you to be a jerk. So consciously try to strike a balance between these two poles, and work to compose a review that's both critical and constructive. So that reaches the end of our content. So we'd be happy to spend the rest of the time answering some of the questions. We received a lot of questions before the webinar, and we have a lot of questions in the chat box. So we will work to answer some questions. And I will start off. We got some questions before through the poll we sent around before the webinar, and we didn't directly address this during the webinar. Is do we want, as editors, do we want comments about the writing and grammar and issues like that? We do not need you to do copy editing, right? We don't really need you to correct individual grammatical errors or punctuation errors, spelling errors, things like that. But we do want to hear if you think if you think the manuscript is poorly written, or that has, you know, it's loaded with grammatical errors, or maybe you might just mention that there are a few grammatical errors or that need to be, or spelling errors that need to be fixed. So we do want comments about what you think about the quality of the writing, because that's definitely a major aspect of the manuscript that we consider in making our decisions. But there's no need to do kind of to spot the individual errors. How much time do you as editors spend on writing and grammar to polish a manuscript? A lot. A lot. And I mean, part of this, I'm speaking for myself now, I tend to go overboard. So if you're an author and I've edited your manuscript, I'm sorry. I tend to go overboard with the copy editing and making the grammar, polishing the writing, making the grammar perfect. That's my flaw, although people do thank me for that too, but I'm still sorry. So we do spend a lot of time. Jill, do you have anything to say to that one?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's helpful to know, you know, we're spending hours on these manuscripts. So as an author, you know, I've been an author and I know that it's hard to get a really marked up manuscript back, but, you know, it's also helpful kind of now from the other side here to know that someone is spending so much time with your work and is really invested in it and is making these comments to ultimately improve the quality of it. So I think knowing that we are actually like spending multiple hours kind of every time we're looking at these, you know, is maybe helpful for everybody as authors. Catherine, do you have a comment on Paula's question about any reasons you've severed relationships with a reviewer? Go ahead.
Yeah, severed relationships with the reviewer. Because yes, chronic lateness. Yes, if the reviewer like constantly, like we give reviewers 3 weeks by default, if it's constantly taking them 5 or 6 weeks to do it, or maybe, you know, declining a review invitation here and there or half the time is not a problem. But if someone's consistently, every time we ask them to review a manuscript, they decline, we eventually give up. Also, if we consistently get low quality, really low quality reviews, so like we know we have mentioned, and this is a sticky point, right? We've mentioned that we do rate the quality of the reviews on a scale of 1 to 10, 1 being low quality and 5 being high quality, and we look at that when we select reviewers. So if somebody is constantly giving us or continuously giving us, 1 to 2 star reviews, basically, like we won't ask that person anymore. And I don't know how to express that to reviewers. I really don't know what the best answer is to that. I don't know. Until you have a thought, because this is a problem that I just don't know how to solve right now.
Yeah, I agree. I'd be interested in, in other folks' ideas here. And I think maybe, what we can do as we're kind of taking this on as a, something for JMLA to kind of work on peer review education is to definitely consider this question as kind of one of our main questions here. And just keep thinking about it and keep thinking about how we want to deal with it. Yeah.
Okay, Brian said that we mentioned guidelines have been created. Can you share where this document is hosted or posted? We do have written guidelines right now. Those are only available to the reviewers when they accept a review invitation. But we will very soon are working to make those public so that those reviewer guidelines are just available to anybody on the JMLA website. And we think this will be helpful both for reviewers or potential reviewers and also for the authors so they can see what we're asking the reviewers to do. I'm going to work backwards through some of these questions.
I wanted to mention too, as we're waiting for more questions, just kind of as a takeaway, I know we mentioned this a few times before, but if you are already signed up on the JMLA system, please go in there as kind of an action item for today and update your reviewer interest, because that is such a big part of how we're even finding reviewers to review on a certain topic. So I know that mine hadn't been updated in a while. I had maybe added 1 or 2 things, and I went in and kind of added a lot more. So if it's something that you have an interest in or an expertise, or really even just an interest, please go in and add that. You can get to that through the user home and then my profile, and then it's just under reviewing interest there. So take that away and do that today. We are going to be sharing the slides for sure. And there was another link that we wanted to share here. If you're interested in peer reviewing, definitely, and you're not on the JMLA, in the JMLA system already, you're not already a reviewer, definitely let us know. I think you can use this email. We're always happy to add new folks to the database. If you're interested in peer reviewing for JMLA, I'm going to share this link here too. This is called the Librarian Peer Reviewer Database. That's some folks asked us to share with everybody. This is for librarians that have expertise in systematic reviews. So if you would like to be a peer reviewer for systematic reviews in just a variety of journals, you can sign up on that database. So feel free to do that too.
Francis asked the question a while back, what do you do if one reviewer recommends rejecting a manuscript, a second recommends accepting the manuscript, and a third recommends accepting it pending revision? So if you have 3 reviewers, one says it's great, one says it's terrible, and one person says something is in the middle, then we'll probably more than likely make a decision that's kind of somewhere in the middle. We're going to ask for revisions. I'm not sure. It depends on the nature of the comments, whether we would go the resubmit for review route, where we subject the manuscript to another round of review with the same reviewers, or if we don't plan to go that way, but we want to revise manuscript. But when there's kind of like this split, it's not uncommon at all that we kind of get some kind of split opinions on manuscripts. A lot of times we will just, we will kind of cast our opinion in as well as editors and read the manuscript and kind of add our opinion as almost like a fourth reviewer to kind of come to some sort of balance. Allison asked, is there ever a situation when an author should reject the comments made by the peer reviewers? Yeah. Like I did say earlier that, I really do think that almost all reviewer comments should be addressed in the revised manuscript. But there are cases, like if the reviewer is just completely off base, it's not just, if the reviewer is completely off base, they're recommending that you make a change that is, like methodologically unacceptable, or there are definite reasons why you don't have to make the revisions to the manuscript that the reviewer asked for, but we want to see in your replies to the reviewer comments, we want to see your rationale for why you don't agree with a peer reviewer, and why you won't be making any changes to the document. A lot of times we see that authors will respond, like a reviewer has a question, the author will respond to that question and provide an answer to that question in the replies to the reviewer comments document, but we don't see that answer reflected in the manuscript, in the revised manuscript at all, which I think is a problem. If when you're responding to a reviewer's comments, most of the time that you should be making corresponding changes in the revised manuscript.
Catherine, do you have any comments on Roxanne's question about how often might reviewers get tapped to review a couple times a year?
I would say definitely not more than 4 times a year. And in most cases, it would be less frequently than that. But if somebody has done a review for us in the past 3 months, I just pretty much, even if they're like a perfect fit for a manuscript that we get, I won't ask them again. I just don't want to ask too much. Our editorial board, we have an editorial board of, I don't know, between 20 and 30 people. And they do lots of things for the journal. So one of the things they do is peer review a lot. So we will ask our editorial board members to peer review much more frequently. But your average reviewer may be between 1 and 4 times a year.
I think that Ryan's comment, hi Ryan, it is really tricky. And I do just want to kind of reiterate, or maybe we didn't even say this, but I wouldn't be too worried as a reviewer about your rating. I think mine is maybe like 4, so it's really
Oh,
not.
no, it has to be high. It's going to be higher than that, Jill.
We'll have to check later. It's definitely not 5, okay? So I think, I think even just the fact that people are here today and are interested in learning about this, I think, I just don't think I would worry like too much about it. If you are interested in getting feedback on your review that you submitted, I think you could definitely ask us, and we could, maybe if you want to talk about that, maybe Catherine. But I don't want to get like too hung up on the reviewer, like the rating, because really what I'm using more than that is the reviewing interest. That's how I'm going to find people probably, and or kind of looking in PubMed, seeing who's published on this topic, who's interested in this topic. The reviewer rating for me is like kind of gets a less consideration maybe than those other things.
What was I going to say here? I think that reviewers seeing being able to see the other reviewers' comments when the editor makes the decision and you get an email, like a kind of a blind carbon copy email of that decision, and you get to see all the other reviewers' comments too. I really, really, really think that's a great learning opportunity, because I think it would be obvious if you write a kind of a really brief, vague, something that we would call a low quality review, and then the other two reviewers provide these really lengthy, verbose, spotting lots of issues, making lots of constructive, recommendations. I think you would probably see a pretty stark difference. So I think it should be pretty clear when you see the other reviewers' comments. It should be pretty clear to you, like which reviewers' reviews were the most valuable to the editorial decision making. If you want personalized feedback on your reviews, we will provide that. I admit that this is a volunteer this is a volunteer operation. The editors are not getting paid for this. We have full-time jobs. So editing this journal takes a lot of time, and we don't have the time to provide very detailed feedback on the quality of your reviews, but we can provide not detailed feedback. We just don't have the time. And we reiterate that we don't see the other reviewers' comments until after you submit your review. So you don't see them until after the author is notified of the decision. And the reviewers will never know who the other reviewers are unless you could pick up something from their writing style or something that they said in the review. But this is, it's a blind peer review process. So you'll be given the title that, like, you'll be reviewer A, and you'll see reviewer B's comments, and you'll see reviewer C's comments, but you won't know who those people are, and neither will the authors. How many manuscripts does JMLA receive a year? On average, about 12 manuscripts a month. I think I've been the editor now for about 3 years, and I've been seeing the number creep upwards. The last 2 months, I don't know if it's because of the pandemic and people are home and people are finding time to write or get to their revisions, but last 2 months we've had 16 submissions each month. So the last couple months have been pretty heavy months for us. Someone just asked about diversity and inclusivity of our editorial team and reviewer pool. We're cognizant of this. I can't say that we have policies or specific actions that put into place to kind of ensure that we have a diverse editorial board and reviewer pool. That's a good suggestion.
Thanks for this. I think this is probably one of my personal goals in being involved in this. I think right now it's kind of an issue because there's no way for us to even measure like demographics of our reviewers, really, or our editorial board. So I think that is definitely a goal of mine in kind of starting these conversations and starting to even think about peer review. And how do we do that? How do we actively make a commitment to do that? And how do we even see who is reviewing, for JMLA, who is on the editorial board, who's not represented, even the authors. I think we can probably do a lot of improvements there. So thanks for this question. I think it's definitely something that I want to work on in the future, for sure. If you have ideas, definitely send them my way, for sure. I got a question. Are prior authors serving as reviewers?
Yes, definitely. And that's one of the ways. A lot of times when we get a manuscript submission and we're selecting reviewers, a lot of the time we are considering potential reviewers who are already in our reviewer database, but a lot of times I'm going out there and like doing PubMed searches to find who is published on this topic and adding like new people to our reviewer database. I do, if I just, based on my memory, I get a manuscript submission, I'm like, oh yeah, this is a lot, you know, very similar in the same vein as a manuscript that we published last year. I will consider asking a previous author. I do routinely kind of go through every time we publish an issue. I check to see if the lead or the corresponding authors on manuscripts are in our reviewer database, because that's exactly who we want. We want people who have published their work, right? Who have research experience, who have publishing experience, who have had their own work peer reviewed, who know what the publishing process at JMLA is like, is familiar with our journal's publishing process. So yes, definitely. Someone asked, apart from this webinar, does MLA offer other kinds of education about peer review? To my knowledge, no. But this has been floated as an idea for, you know, like a CE or like an in-person like workshop at MLA annual meeting. So I think that in the brief, this was a great turnout for this webinar. We're getting lots of great questions, and so this really is saying to me that there is interest in this topic and a desire for more resources and more training in this. So this very well might be you know, something that we continue to, Jill and I and other people too, continue developing education and resources around.
And I just put something in the chat. There is a really great training through PubLams, the PubLams Academy peer reviewer training. I just did it a few weeks ago, and
it's brand new,
I learned a lot. Yeah. So I think regardless of your, you know, your expertise, how many times you've done this, I found it to be really helpful too, and it's free. So if anybody's interested, just Google that one.
Wilma asked if there have been have we got a lot of submissions about, you know, submissions related to COVID-19? Yes, we have gotten a lot of submissions about COVID-19 in the last couple months. I can tell a lot of them aren't coming from MLA members. And unfortunately, a lot of them I just don't think are very high quality, and maybe so I didn't even send a lot of them out for peer review. I think a lot of people are seeing this pandemic as a publishing opportunity, which is not to say that all COVID-19 manuscripts are going to be bad. There's going to be, I think there's going to be ultimately a lot of really interesting work coming out of this, you know, for libraries in terms of outreach, how they handled the pandemic, bibliometric studies. I think there's, you know, JMLA is going to be publishing a lot of COVID-19 stuff. I know that we are, and over the next coming months or years. But it seems like this is a lot of people are kind of jumping on the bandwagon of let's do a bibliometric study on all the COVID-19 publications that have been published. And I just don't, at this point, when we're still really in the flux of this, I kind of feel that a lot of those analyses are too preliminary, and that there's going to be so many papers published on, you know, doing the same study basically. So yeah, but I definitely have seen an uptick and maybe that's explains part of the jump in submissions that we've received over the past couple months. Are at least half of them, or maybe about half of them, have been COVID-19 related.
I'm going towards the top just to make sure that we didn't miss any questions as well. But I think we really did cover many things, and I know that when each of you were speaking, the other was commenting and answering things, so I hope that folks were able to see those comments. in the chat. There was a question, is the chat going to be available? I am copying it, and I'll make that a document, and I can send that out when I let you know that the recording is available. You will all have access to that as well. And one other person, or probably a couple people, asked if the slides would be available, and I did just send that today with your reminder email. The slides are in a PDF format, so there's 2 slides per page. So you do have access to those already. So check your email. Also will be in MedLibed as well, so you'll find them. I'm not sure, Jill and Catherine, are you seeing any other questions?
Not really.
Just being lauded with praise here. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you, everybody.
And hopefully this was helpful. Hopefully we addressed some of that imposter syndrome. You all can definitely do this. And hopefully we're giving you the tools to be able to do it.
Absolutely. So I think I'll go ahead and close things out here for us. Just a big thank you to Catherine and Jill for sharing your expertise with us today. Really a lot of valuable information for both reviewers and authors. Again, we have recorded today's webinar, and we'll make that available. It'll be in MedLibed, and I'm hoping it'll be there by Friday. I will send out an email notification and let you know when it is available. You will need to log into your My Learning on MedLibed to access the recording. Reminder, to claim credit for participating today, you need to complete the online evaluation, again, going to My Learning on MedLibed. If you're participating through a site, you will need an enrollment code. There you'll be able to claim credit and download your certificate for participating. Join us on June 23rd for our next monthly webinar. It's titled Critical Appraisal of Systematic Reviews and Meta-Analysis. That'll be on June 23rd if you're interested. Registration is open for that webinar and for many upcoming other MLA webinars as well, so consider joining us. That's all we have for today. Thanks again to both Jill and Catherine, and to all of our participants for your active participation. It's been great. Have a great day, everyone.